Good evening, students. My name is Kathleen, and I'm going to be going through your webinar on brand management. Can everybody hear me? Awesome. I've got 1 year so far, so I think everything is ready to go. Fantastic. So as we work through this first session of brand management, our aim is to get you prepared for answering your assignment questions and to get you on the right track as you start your studies of brand management. Please, as we're working through, if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. And I will also stop at certain points to check if you have any questions and see if there's any other input that you guys would like to give. So I'll start working through the slides as we go now. And anything that you might have a query about or anything that you'd like some more information on, or if you have some input that you would like to give to the other students, please just let me know. So we are going through brand management. The first thing that I want us to look at is how your brand management module is designed to work with your other modules. And the reason for this is that it will assist you in the way that you answer your questions and the way that you approach the subject to see how it's meant to relate with everything else that you are doing in your qualification. So if we look at the relationship to brand management with your other modules, as per your learner guide, Iman tells us that by now you have come to know marketing, hopefully, as an innovative activity within an organization through which ideas, brands, products, and services are received. It's looking at your 4Ps, so your products and services being your first P, then your pricing, promotion, and place, also known as your distribution. And all of that is designed to satisfy customer needs, which is part of our marketing as a whole, and through which it is possible to anticipate and even create consumers' future. With this in mind, it's easy to see that brand management is actually a core and could be operating at the center of marketing and is an integral part of marketing strategy development. With this in mind, your brand management module has been designed with specific outcomes that are intended to be demonstrated by you as a student at the end of your syllabus. So basically, throughout your assignments and through your exam, these are the things that I am going to need to ensure that you guys are familiar with. So the first one is understanding branding fundamentals, which is pretty much what we cover in chapter 1 of your syllabus. Then developing branding strategies, which is pretty much chapters 2 and 3. And then designing and implementing your brand marketing programs, which is the middle section of your syllabus. We are only going to be working up to chapter 4 tonight, so it'll be the introduction to your designing and implementation of your strategies. Then you will, as you work through the rest of the syllabus, you should be able to measure your different sources of brand equity. You should hopefully be able to grow and sustain your brand equity. And finally, we need you to be sure that by the time you complete this course, you know what makes up a strong brand today as well as in the future. So these module-specific outcomes are your broad outcomes for the syllabus, and these are contained on page 8 of your learning guide. So all the information that I'm giving you guys tonight, you do have access to through your learning guide. Now, those are broad outcomes. Each chapter has its own specific outcome. And your outcomes that your learner guide gives to you are very important for all of your subjects. Because these are basically the guidelines on what you guys should be studying. And they're also the guidelines that are used in drawing up your assessment. So your assignments and your exams. So if you follow these carefully, you should be sure to cover all of the important information, and you should be very well prepared for your assignment and exam process. So if we have a look, this is on pages 8 and 9 of your learner guides. If you have a look at your learning outcomes for chapter 1, you will see that your first one is defining what branding is all about. And be sure to pay attention to the action words or the verbs that are given at the beginning of these outcomes, because these are going to point you in the direction of how thoroughly you need to work through each concept. So our first one, definition, it's going to be very much theory-based. So learn your theory in the beginning of your learner guide, where we talk to you about the definition of a brand, how your brand fits in with your different parts of your product, and so on. The second outcome then looks at why brands have become so important in today's context. Your third one, explaining how branding applies to virtually everything. Now that verb explain means that you'll have to be able to tackle this to a deeper level, and you'll have to provide more than just a definition. So explain generally means that you need to have a definition, some detail added to that definition, and possibly an example as well. Then we have describe the main branding challenges and opportunities facing marketers. And to conclude for chapter 1, identify the steps in the strategic brand management. So those are the core topics that you need to cover when you are studying chapter 1 of your syllabus. Moving on to chapter 2. Chapter 2 and 3 are our chapters that cover our process of developing brand strategies. So having a look at chapter 2, your first outcome is you should be able to outline the sources as well as the outcome of customer-based brand equity. Then we move on to being able to identify as well as establish brand position. We move on to being able to describe the guidelines in developing good brand positioning. And then a new concept, being able to explain a brand mantra and how it should be developed. Finally, your last outcome for chapter 2 says that you should be able to explain the advantages of having a strong brand. Having a look at chapter 3, your first outcome for this chapter is being able to describe the 4 steps in building brand resonance. And you'll see as we work through how this is actually closely related to your concepts of customer-based brand equity that we cover in chapter 2. The second outcome for chapter 3 looks at being able to identify and explain the stages in the brand value chain. And this means that you need to be able to perhaps draw the brand value chain. You also need to discuss the elements in it. And then the explain bit means that you should be able to relate it to a case study. So again, your verbs are telling you that this is a concept that you should have a really good understanding of. Then we move on to our third outcome for chapter 3, which is contrasting brand equity with customer equity. So that would require you to have a good understanding of what both of those terms mean, and then being able to break down and identify what are the differences between them, and be able to explain those differences well to your examiner, so that your examiner has a clear understanding of what the differences are. Then we move on to the next section of your study guide, which is now looking at how you are going to be designing and implementing your brand marketing program. So we look at chapter 4, and this is where you need to start looking at how do you develop and design your brand. So our first outcome is apply the criteria for actually choosing your brand elements, so your brand name, logo, your colors, things like that. Then we have describe the key tactics in choosing these different brand elements. So how do we go about selecting them? And highlighting some of the legal issues that surround your brand elements. So that's important. We can't just choose things. We need to consider if there's certain implications. Moving on to chapter 6 of your textbook, we will then need to focus on the way that we communicate our brand or our promotion. So here we were looking at the first outcome, describing some of the changes in the new media environment. Your second outcome would be outlining the major 4 marketing communication options and the related tactical issues. So in other words, planning which marketing communication options you want to use, and then looking at the operational side and the actual activities involved in implementing those communications. And our final outcome for Chapter 6 is to identify and apply the choice criteria in developing an integrated marketing communication program. Finally, for this section of designing and implementing your brand marketing program, we would then look at Chapter 7, which focuses on leveraging secondary association. So this is a very important concept with brand management. We'll be looking at it more in depth. Even in this tutorial already, we're going to be going through what secondary association can do for your brand. And then your last outcome for Chapter 7 will be to describe some of the key tactical issues involved in actually leveraging those brands. If we move on to your last few chapters that you're going to be studying for the syllabus, Chapter 9 looks at measuring your sources of brand equity. So not just knowing where your equity comes from, but actually measuring how much equity each source is bringing you and how effective they are in building brand equity. Your first outcome here would be to describe effective, qualitative research techniques for tapping into consumer brand knowledge. So we know that our qualitative research is focusing much more on people's opinions and feelings and allowing them to express themselves freely without their being contained with closed questions. And that then brings you to your second outcome, which is to identify effective quantitative research techniques, which is where we would use questionnaires and surveys of a more closed nature so that we can measure brand awareness, brand image, brand responses, and brand relationships. And you'll see how those 4 elements that we'll be measuring are the key elements in building your brand equity. Moving on to your final study unit, which is the last 3 chapters that you're going to be studying for this particular syllabus. Looking at Chapter 12, you are going to be thinking about growing your brand. And we grow our brand through brand extension. So the first important outcome we need to be looking at is the ability to define the different types of brand extension. So that would be a pretty much a theory question, perhaps defining the different extensions and being able to provide examples. Then we look at being able to identify and explain the main advantages as well as the disadvantages that brand extensions pose to your brand. Then we look at being able to summarize how your consumers evaluate extensions and how extensions actually contribute to your parent brand equity or your umbrella brand equity. And finally, you should be able to outline the key assumptions and success criteria for your brand extension. So hopefully again, you're starting to see how these verbs are important. We have the verb define, which is very theoretical. Then we have identify and explain, which means that you need to have an in-depth understanding and be able to apply examples. Then we have summarize, which would just be required that you show a brief understanding and be able to shorten the theory content of your module. And then outline, which is sort of like a list type process. Then moving on to your last 2 chapters. Chapter 14 is your last real study chapter, because 15 is sort of an overview of the entire syllabus. So with Chapter 14, what you're going to be looking at is you need to understand why a brand would want to go global. So understanding the rationale behind developing a global brand, and then outlining the different advantages and disadvantages of developing a standardized global marketing program. Finally, define the strategic steps involved in developing a global brand position. So it's very similar to the things that you have already been covered in the syllabus, just now you're looking at it from a global perspective. Finally then, chapter 15 is called Closing Observations, and that's basically just because it's a summary of what you've learned so far. You are going to have to be able to summarize the customer-based brand equity framework, which has sort of been a running theme throughout the rest of the textbook. Then again, discuss what makes a strong brand, which is a topic that was introduced in chapter 1 and is again sort of carried throughout the rest of the syllabus. Identifying the criteria for the brand report card, which is sort of a checklist that we use when conducting a brand audit or measuring how well our brand has performed. And finally, identify and explain future brand priorities, where you want to take your brand in the future, which is very similar to what is discussed in 12 and 14. So, now that we have an understanding of where your studies are going to be taking you throughout brand management, we have a good foundation that we can build on. So we're going to start off by looking at, starting with chapter 1, with your first outcome is just being able to define what branding is. And we can start off with a definition. Keller gives us the following definition of a brand. It is a name, a term, a sign, a symbol, a design, or a combination of all of those things that identifies a product, firstly, and secondly, that differentiates it from competitors' products. So we have three key parts to that definition. So we could say if you were asked this in an exam situation, it would probably be a 3 to 5 mark question. The first part would be you being able to say the name, the term, the sign, the symbol, the design, or a combination. The second part would be its purpose, and our purpose is twofold: to identify the product and then to differentiate it from competitors' offerings. And in order to get all your marks, because remember, you need to be giving your theory and examples. You need to give an example that demonstrates all three of those aspects. So if we look at a brand like Coca-Cola, the name, term, sign, symbol, design component is the name Coca-Cola, it's the logo, the colors that they use, all of those things. The fact that it allows us to identify the product means that when we go up to a fridge in a supermarket and you see all the different soft drinks, you can identify very quickly which is Coca-Cola, and then it will also stop you from accidentally purchasing, say, a Pick and Pay no-name brand cola or a Pepsi Cola. So giving a good explanation and a good example will just help you to get all the marks that you need. And it will help your marker to know that you do fully understand what this concept is about. So going on to our next topic is what is really the difference between a brand and a product. And it's important for us to see where the brands fit in with our different products or our different levels of product. So you have a diagram that's presented to you in your learning guide, and this diagram breaks up your product into 5 levels. Your first level, which is shown at the center, is your core product. And this is basically the want or the need that is being satisfied. So if we go back to our Coca-Cola example, the basic want or need that is being satisfied with a can of Coke is that it is going to quench your thirst. So that's quite a generic type of need, and many different products will be able to offer a solution to that particular one. That brings us then to our second level, and this is the generic product offering. And these are the characteristics that are necessary for the functionality of this product that is going to satisfy your wants or needs. So at the generic product offering of Coca-Cola, you're looking at something that is liquid, that is might be chilled, and that is refreshing. Then we go on to our third level, and this is the expected product. This is where customers start to differentiate between one brand or product offering and another, because they have expectations. So if you're going to drink a beverage that's going to quench your thirst, you would probably expect that it would taste pleasant. You would probably expect you would expect that it would quench your thirst. Moving on then to our fourth level of our product, we get to the augmented product. And this is where your product starts to stand out from your competitors. This is the level where your branding becomes important, because now you are looking at what are the additional attributes, benefits, and features and related services that make Coca-Cola different from other beverages that I could consume to quench my want or need, which is thirst. So what does Coca-Cola have that is different to other products? They have a unique taste. They have a unique packaging. It's always meant to be sold at a specific temperature so that it will be refreshing. And those are the things that make one brand stand out from another. And that's why branding is so important in our product. Otherwise, all of our products would probably sit around the generic product level and not really reach the augmented level. Finally, your last level is the potential product. Future changes that could happen in your product. And this relates to our chapter 15, which we're looking at the back of the syllabus, which is where your product could go in the future or your future branding priority. So looking at those four, I hope that this will help you in your definition of what a product is. What a brand is, to where it fits into your product and how it is going to help differentiate your product and at what level your branding becomes. So having now defined our brand fully, I think that it's a good point for me to check in with you and see if anyone has any questions related to it. No? So it looks like so far so good, and we can continue with our analysis of what brands are. So looking at our brand, one of our outcomes was being able to define and understand why brands are important. So brands are important to both us as a customer as well as to the manufacturers who own the brand for a number of different reasons. Firstly, to us as a customer, your brand helps you to identify the product. So going back to our example of walking up to a fridge in the supermarket that's filled with all these different beverages, knowing what Coca-Cola looks like, the colors, the logo, the symbolism behind it, means that you can very quickly and easily reach for your product and grab it off the shelf. Having a brand also assigns responsibility to the product maker. It means that you are able to go back if you have a complaint or a query about the product. You can trace who manufactured that particular brand and you can ask them or lay a claim against them. Then a third benefit that brands offer to us as a customer is they reduce risk. Generally, if your brand has a good reputation, it means that it is probably going to perform the function that it's meant to perform, not going to offer you any physical harm, not going to have the financial risks of you wasting your money, because you know that this brand has a good reputation. Also, if you've used a product before, it means that knowing what brand you used previously, and if you're satisfied, it means that you can go back and find that brand once it's made and hopefully get that same satisfaction, which means that it reduces the time it takes you to find your product, and it also reduces psychological stress and worry and concern that you might not necessarily be purchasing the correct product. And finally, I've left it to last because one of the main benefits that we get from using brands is social approval, whether it be a status symbol or offering us a certain image, or just the fact that we know that our peers use this brand, that we use it, we're safe. So those are all of the risks that we don't necessarily incur if we use a brand that is well known. Your fourth benefit to you as a customer is it reduces your search time. Again, thinking about going up to the fridge in the supermarket, knowing exactly what product you want and walking away, rather than having to go through and read ingredients and try to figure out which product it was that satisfied your needs. Then we have the benefit that your brand carries with it a brand promise, which is basically what the brand is offering you. A manufacturer is making to you, that this product will always satisfy your needs, that it will offer you, if you think about Coca-Cola, it's going to offer you refreshment, and that it's going to offer you a little bit of energy and a sweet taste as well. Then your brand also acts as a symbolic device, again demonstrating to you what the product is, who the manufacturer is, and if it is going to be offering you value or not. And finally, your brand is a signal of quality. We often know that branded products, especially well-known brands, tend to be priced at a premium, meaning priced a little bit higher than generic products in the product category. And that's because if a brand is well established in the market and has a good reputation, it carries with it a assumed quality. And as a customer, we know that if we use that particular product, we will get that quality offer. To give you another example, if you look at chains, let's think of restaurants with Steers, McDonald's, you are guaranteed that every time you purchase a product from one of those chains, the product is going to be of the same quality every single time. So that is the promise that the brand is giving, that you know what you are buying every time you purchase a product. So that's great. Brands are awesome for us as customers. They give us a lot of benefits. But why would a company be willing to invest all the time and money and effort in building up these brands? Well, that's because the company also gets a lot of benefits. The first thing that the company gets is easy identification. As a manufacturer, you want to be able to find your product in a store or in a warehouse or on a truck just as easily as a customer would want to be able to find it in a store. So it makes it easier for you to handle and to trace your product. Imagine if you were Simba and all of your chips were manufactured in the same silver packet, and they maybe had a very small black stamp on the bottom that signaled which product flavor they were. Imagine how difficult it would be for you to check your stock and to monitor what is on the shelves in various stores if everything looks the same. So your branding gives you easy identification. Your branding also gives you legal protection. This brand that you've worked so hard to build up the reputation for, that you've actually grown yourself and that you've invested so much money in, it isn't really fair if someone else can come and just stick that brand on their own product. So legal protection in the form of copyrights and trademarks are very important for your manufacturer. Your brand is also going to signal a quality level to satisfy your customers. Often companies actually sell branded products that suit different levels of customer satisfaction, where you'll have a luxury brand, a middle of the road brand, and then a cheaper, less high quality brand. And for the manufacturer, they want to be able to tell which of their products is the premium one and which is the less premium one. So your branding helps your manufacturers with that as well. Branding is a means of attaching unique associations to a product. If you think of a brand like Ferrari, as soon as I say Ferrari, you will have associations or other ideas that pop into your head about Ferrari. Often I get, if I ask students, what do you think of when you think of Ferrari? People say red, Italian, speed, so going fast. So those are all unique associations. The associations that you might have if you think of a Ferrari would possibly be a little bit different than the associations that you would have if you think of the old classic BMW Beetle. And those are the things that brands bring with them, those additional secondary associations. Then your brand is often a source of competitive advantage. If people are loyal to your brand, they resonate with your brand, which is a term we're going to learn about later. It just means that your brand will possibly have more market share, be able to be sold at a premium, and just be more successful in the market. And finally, if you have a good brand and people are brand loyal and you are able to charge a premium and you have more market share, it probably means that you're going to be earning good financial return. Strong brands lead to profitability. So that is probably the ultimate goal that companies have when they're designing their brands, is that those big profit margins that they want to get into. Moving on, we look at the branding challenges and opportunities that your marketers have to face when looking at brands. Now, in your learner guide, you are presented with the 7 main challenges and opportunities that brands face, but in your textbook, you are given a few more. I'm going to tell you now the page number that you need to be looking at to see them. These challenges start on page 52 of your textbook, if you want to follow in your textbook. And they go through a little bit of a more extensive list. They also explain each of these challenges in detail. So, but the main 7 that we focus on are savvy customers. We know customers are becoming smarter. You know yourself that when you purchase a product, you can do background research. You can look on the internet, you can find out a lot of information about the product itself, as well as competing products. And smarter customers are a challenge to us as marketers, because it means that we need to provide them with more information. And we also need to be able to answer their questions, because more informed people tend to question a purchase rather than just accepting what the brand advertises to offer. Another challenge that we are faced with is economic downturns. So previously it was assumed that your bigger economies like the USA and the UK were going to be gold mines. If you've got a strong brand, that's where you want your brand to be marketed, because everyone has money there and everyone will be able to afford the price points. But this isn't necessarily true. We have noticed that our economies globally are becoming more volatile with a lot of ups and downs. And this just means that as a branded marketer offering a branded product that generally comes at a premium price, these economic downturns are a problem for us, because when people have less disposable income, they have less money. Then we have brand proliferation. And your textbook actually words this differently. If you are following in your textbook and you go to page 54 of your textbook, they discuss your brand proliferation more as the expansion of your portfolio of brands. If we think about back to my favorite example that you'll see I'm going to use a lot throughout this, is Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola used to have just Coke. Then they expanded into a lot of different flavors. So we have Coke, and we have Fanta, and we have Sprite, there's water products, and there's also Coke. Then if we even just look at Coke itself, Coke expanded into Coke Light or Diet Coke. From there, Coke then developed Coke Zero, which is meant to have the same taste as original Coke, but without the sugar. And now we have Coke Light as well. So your brand portfolios are really expanding, or the family under the brand umbrella is growing. So that's what we mean by brand proliferation. It's just the expansion of the brand portfolio. And obviously, the more brands you have to manage, the more complicated your management task becomes. The fourth one that your learner guide mentions, and this is also in your textbook, on your next page of your textbook, page 55, is media transformation. As marketers, we are studying all the new types of media that are available for us to communicate with our customers. And we've gone from traditional media of TV, radio, newspaper, magazine, and billboards, and other outdoor marketing tools, to now include digital marketing, which is huge. Our TVs have expanded so much in the number of channels that we have. And now you're not even just advertising on TV, you're now advertising on pay-per-view systems like Showmax and Netflix. So it's just another more complicated task for the marketer. We have increased competition. In South Africa alone, you guys have learned through a number of your subjects over the last few years how South Africa has faced increased competition from the global markets. But even companies that were already in the global market, there's just more competitors all around, as technology is allowing more people to compete, and technology is also allowing more people to reach more markets. You have increased costs of inflation, the increased cost of living, increased cost of transportation. All of these things are leading to costs constantly going up as a marketer. So the cost of research and development is more expensive. The cost of producing your product is more expensive. The cost of marketing your product is more. The cost of distributing your product. So overall, all of the input costs that it takes to get your product onto the shelf are increasing. And this means that you need to communicate with your customer why your product is worth the price that it's being sold for. And finally, the last one that is given to us in our learner guide, which is also in your textbook, it's given to you as the final point in your textbook as well, on page 56, is greater accountability. As a marketer, you can't go into your planning sessions with the CEO and the financial manager and the operations manager and sit down and say, I would like R1 million for marketing. They're not going to just hand this money over. When we talk about greater accountability, marketers are now responsible for explaining how is this R1 million investment going to earn a decent return to the company. So marketing is not considered an expense anymore. It's seen as an investment. And you as a marketer are accountable for spending that money wisely and earning a good return on the investment for your company as a whole. So we word these 7 as challenges. But in business, we know every challenge can also pose an opportunity for us to be better and do better. So if I look at the first one, savvy customers. Yes, they're a challenge. Smart customers means we have to work harder as a marketer. But smart customers also give us the opportunity to show our customers that we can live up to their expectations and we can deliver on our promises and explain to them why we are better than our competitors. So each one of these challenges actually offers us an opportunity as a brand to rise to that challenge and to meet our customers' needs and expectations. And if you are the brand that can do that, you are the brand that is going to get the customer loyalty, that is going to build that resonance, which we are going to look at later. Then, moving on to brand equity. We now know what a brand is, but what is brand equity? This word equity is a financial term, and to break it down simply, it means value. So, brand value literally means the value that the brand brings to your company. So if we take a very easy example, if you take a white t-shirt, you can go get a white t-shirt from Pep for about R29.99. Or you can go buy a branded white t-shirt from a store like Edgar's, depending on the brand that you like. It could be a sports brand, it could be a fashion label. And that branded t-shirt could then cost you anywhere from between R299 to R999. So what is the difference? Why are you willing to pay so much more than your $29.99 for a white t-shirt because it has a brand name on it? And that is brand equity. It is the value that that brand is giving you as a customer, the reassurance that it is good quality, the social status that you get from it, the fact that it feels like it's a little bit better than the one that you can buy at Pep. That is what brand equity is. So brand equity has increased the importance of brand marketing strategy because we can convince the customer that this premium product should be paid for at a higher rate than the $29.99 one from Pep. The responsibility is on us as marketers to build a good marketing campaign so our customers believe us. So this means that we have to focus on creating differences. As marketing students, you guys know what differentiation is. It's making your product unique and better than what the competitors are offering. Another important thing is that the product needs to be giving added value. Even if that added value is simply the fact that a sports team's name is across the front, so that that customer feels as though they are supporting their team and the whole world knows that they are a fan, then that is what the brand needs to do. Brand equity provides a common denominator for interpreting marketing strategies and assessing the value of the brand. So the value behind a brand means that as a customer, I know If a product has a brand name on it, it is offering a certain level of quality. And it also means that as a manufacturer, I know that as soon as I put that brand on that product, it's going to be worth more in the marketplace. Brand equity can be manifested in many ways, but most importantly, as marketers, we are exploiting it for financial gain. And I don't want us to see this term exploit in a negative way when we talk about branding. Why have you invested all this time and effort in marketing your brand? For the reason that you want to make a lot of profit from it. You want to exploit it for financial gain, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. And finally, brand equity reinforces how important the brand is for marketing strategy. So as a marketer, the fact that this brand can bring in measurable financial gains to the company means that we now have justification for why we need money to invest in our marketing. So how do we monitor our brand equity? Brand equity can be seen through customer responses to marketing. So when we run a campaign that advertises our brand and customers go out and purchase the product, that is a sign of brand equity. Brand knowledge is another sign. When you show customers a brand and they tell you, oh, I know that brand, they sell this product and it does this, performs this function for me, and these are the competitors and it's better than the competition for this and this and this reason, that shows that customers have learned things about our brand, they have felt things about our brand, they've seen and heard things, so word of mouth, and they've also experienced things about our brand. And then we have what we call the differential effect. The fact that there will be a different reaction from customers because of our brand than if the product wasn't branded. And that shows that our marketing has made a difference in our customers' mindset and then a difference in our market performance. And these terms are going to be very important to us as we look later at the brand. Sorry, I see a comment that the audio is poor. If I speak a little bit louder, is the audio better now? Okay, well, I see. Okay, fantastic. So I'll make sure to speak a little bit louder. If I start getting softer again, just let me know. Looking at one of the main benefits of brand equity or having a well-recognized brand is that we get increased market share. Hopefully you guys remember, market share means the percentage of all the customers in the market for your particular product. So the bigger our market share basically just means more sales and more customers for us. How do brands lead to increased market share? Well, there's a number of different ways. The first way is through brand recognition. So when customers see your brand on the shelf, they recognize it, they know what it has to offer, and they make the purchase. Another benefit is brand experience. If customers have used your brand in the past and they had a positive experience, they are going to purchase again, which will lead to more market share. We also look at brand preference. If customers prefer your brand over others, it will lead to loyalty and increased market share. And finally, our brand loyalty. We all know what brand loyalty is. We all work hard towards it as marketers. It means that customers want your brand and they will make sacrifices like going to a further away store, paying additional money in order to have your brand. And this will lead to increased market share. Then we look at the brand management process. So your brand management process, if you are following in your textbooks, your brand management process is on page 59 of the textbook, and it moves through 4 steps. And they are basically the same steps that we are following as we move through the syllabus. So the first step that we look at is identifying and establishing your brand portfolio and your brand values, which we are going to be looking at in chapter 2. Your next step is to plan and then implement your brand management program, which we are going to be looking at in chapters 2, 3, and 4. Then you will measure and interpret your brand performance. This we are going to be looking at as we work through the later chapters in the syllabus. So this will be in our next webinar. And finally, you look at growing and sustaining, which is your last 4 chapters of your brand syllabus, which is looking at chapters 12, chapters 14, and chapters 15. So the process is very similar to the structure that your syllabus has been put into. Then looking at the 5 factors that define a brand. So these are given to you in your learner guide, and they are a summary of a lot of concepts that are discussed in your textbook. The first one is brand promise. Brand promise is what customers are being told they will get when they buy the product. It is more than merely the tangible products and services. It is things like the customer experience and the feeling they will get from using the product and the social recognition that they will get from using the product. So that is your brand promise. Then we have brand perceptions. Brand perceptions are built by customers. They're in the customer's mind. What does the customer perceive they will get from the offering? So when I buy a Coca-Cola to drink, I know that the brand has promised me that I will have refreshments, but I also perceive that I'll get a little bit of an energy boost and that I'll just feel ready for the rest of the challenges of my day. Or I perceive that when I drink it while I'm eating, I'm going to enjoy my meal. Then we have brand expectations. Your brand expectations are a combination of the brand promise combined with brand perception. And it's what the customer expects every time they use the brand. Now, if the brand lives up to those expectations, your customers will be satisfied and they will keep returning and you will have your brand loyalty. However, if you fail to meet the expectation, that is when you will have a term that you hopefully remember from Marketing 1, cognitive dissonance, meaning customers are unsatisfied and they regret making that purchase. And that will obviously damage your reputation and damage your brand loyalty. Then we have your brand persona. If your brand was a person, the easiest example that I can give you guys is Ronald McDonald. So he's the brand persona of McDonald's. And he represents everything McDonald's is meant to be about. Fun, on the go, and quite youthful. As seen with McDonald's, they focus on happy meals, kids and children, and like that. Then you have your brand elements. Now your brand elements we're going to look at in chapter 4. They are all the little bits and pieces that go together to build your brand. As our definition said, the name, the term, the symbols, the design, and the sign, that all go together to build what your brand is about. And they are made up of tangible elements, but also intangible elements as well, like the feeling people get when they use the brand, or the memories they have from using the brand previously throughout their lives. So that concludes chapter 1. I'd like to now open up for you guys to pose any questions that you might have relating to chapter 1. I'll give you a minute or two to think about anything that you might want to ask. Okay, so the first question I have here is, how does symbol or shapes affect brand recognition? And the shape of your logo is actually very important, and in many cases it is actually something that can be protected and that can become legally part of the brand. So if we think about Coca-Cola, for example, we could say that the way that the logo is written, that is made up of a certain shape. But even the shape of the glass Coca-Cola bottle that is often used in the advertising, that shaped bottle is actually trademarked to Coca-Cola. So when I see the Coca-Cola logo, I recognize it as being Coca-Cola. But when I see that bottle, I also recognize it as being Coca-Cola. So there are times when our symbol can hold just as much value as the brand name itself. Another example that we could use is the Nike pick. So that swoosh symbol is synonymous with Nike. And there's a lot of times in their advertising where they will actually just use the symbol, or on their clothing just use the symbol and not actually use their name. So the symbol can hold as much value as what the name does. I have another question here that says on page 53 of the textbook, there are more challenges than the 7 in the learner guide. So, and then you're linking that to your assignment. So yes, in your assignment you are only asked to discuss 5. So IMM has highlighted 7 of them as being the most important ones that they would like for you to study. So I would naturally go towards picking my 5 out of the 7 that IMM has given, but you are more than welcome to use the additional ones that are included in your textbook. They are equally challenges and opportunities that all brand managers face. They might just be a little bit less important than the 7 that you have, but you can feel free to use. Okay, so I hope that I answered your questions sufficiently. I don't see any more questions coming through, so I think that we can continue with chapters 2 and 3. So to start off with, I would like to explain to you guys why I've combined 2 and 3 together. 2 and 3 work very well together. They are both looking at how you start understanding your brand and where your brand value comes from. So they cover a lot of topics that are interrelated. So I will be working on the 2 of them together. So there'll be bits of reference in chapter 2 from chapter 3 and reference from 3 to 2. So if there's any parts where you get confused about where I'm looking, whether it's chapter 2 or 3 in the textbook, then feel free to ask. But I'm following a very similar flow to what your learner guide is following, and I will try to highlight where key information is in your textbook as well as we go. So to start off with, we're looking at customer-based brand equity. What does that mean? If we break down that term, customer-based means that it is residing inside the mind of your customer. So it's based on how your customer thinks and feels. Brand equity, brand value. So if I take that term and simplify it into a definition, it is the value that the brand holds in the mind of the customer based on how they think and feel about that particular brand. We have 3 key points that we look at with customer-based brand equity. And we're reading in your textbook from pages 68 to 69. So the questions that we ask ourselves are, is customer-based brand equity making a difference in how customers view our brand? So ideally, we want our customers' view of our brand to have an effect on how they respond to our marketing. So hopefully, if customers see an advert for our particular brand, they will respond in a positive light because they view our brand positively. The second point that we consider with customer-based brand equity is positive brand equity results when customers are familiar with your brand and when they have strong, favorable, and unique associations. So that's important. Those 3 terms there, you're going to hear us use them over and over again throughout the syllabus. Strong, favorable, and unique. Strong meaning that the customers actually care about it, that it has a big impact on them, almost that they are passionate about it. Favorable meaning positive, and unique meaning they feel differently about our product than they do about competitive products. So it's that element of differentiation. Your third point is the power of the brand ultimately resides with the customer. If customers stop respecting your brand and no longer view your brand as valuable, then your brand will no longer hold market share, hold a premium price tag, or really be as valuable as what it was. We then go on to looking at brand knowledge. Without brand knowledge, you won't have brand equity. Customers won't value something that they don't know about. So your brand knowledge has two components, brand awareness and brand image. So brand awareness is how much of the customer's memory your product actually holds. And if you think about a product like Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola is marketed everywhere. So every store, almost every store you go into, a grocery store that sells snacks and those types of products, will have a Coca-Cola sign somewhere. Either a Coca-Cola fridge or the storefront will be labeled with Coca-Cola. They market themselves a lot. And that's because they want to be what we call top of the customer's mind, where they're right in front of your memory. And that's what brand awareness is all about. And then we have brand image. These are the perceptions of the brand based on customers' memories and association. And like I said to you, it's what customers relate to when they think about a brand. So our example of Ferrari, the color red, Italian, fast, expensive, it stays simple. So your textbook gives you an example of a mind map that can be used to understand brand image. And it is on page 73 of your textbook. And it is a mind map for Apple. So they did a survey, they said to some customers, what do you think of when you hear the name Apple? And they said they thought of it being user-friendly, educational, fun, desktop publishing, friendly, iPod, graphics, creative, cool. They thought of the Apple logo in the center. They thought it's innovative, and they thought of Macintosh. So this tells us what the brand image is of Apple. It's seen as being innovative and fun and friendly and cool, creative to use. So this is a good mind map or a good technique for us to understand brand image. Then we have our sources of brand equity. So we just looked at now, brand equity is made up of brand awareness and brand image. And those are your two key sources of brand equity. You want to have high levels of brand awareness, and you want to have a brand image that is strong, favorable, and looking at our sources of brand equity in a little bit more detail, brand awareness is made up of two concepts, brand recognition and brand recall. You guys should remember this from previous studies. Brand recognition means that customers can recognize a brand. If I show you a logo, you will be able to say, oh, I know exactly which product that is. And brands that have high recognition are brands like Apple, Samsung, Coca-Cola, BMW, Mercedes, Starbucks, brands like that. Things that we look at and we immediately know what that imagery is related to. Brand recall is a deeper level of awareness. This is where customers will think of the product on their own without having to be shown a picture or listen to a jingle. So that is where if I were to say to you, name 5 fast food franchises, you would then name your top 5, and that would show me which ones you recall above others. So that was our first source of brand equity, which was brand awareness. Now we are looking at brand image as our second source of brand equity. And this refers to the way the market as a whole views your product or your company. So the example that we have here is of Rolex. Rolex is viewed as a luxury brand, which means that it's quite expensive, so it has a high-end market. It's seen as being very good quality. You would assume that it would be marketed in fancy, glossy magazines. It would be sold in boutique stores, as opposed to being sold in like a factory outlet store or something like that. So when we look at our definition of brand image, which if you are following in your textbook, you will find on page 76. Many companies attempt to create strong brands that people identify with an actual product category. So here we look at things like often if people are using a tablet, they will refer to that tablet as an iPad. So that brand becomes synonymous with that entire product category. So if you have that level of brand awareness and that your brand is synonymous with that product category, then you have high levels of brand equity. So how do you go about building a strong brand that has strong brand awareness and that has a good brand image, or as we like to say, strong, favorable, and unique brand image? We have 4 steps in the brand building process. Step 1 is, who are you? You have to tell your customers who you are as a brand. I'm just looking quickly for where this is in your textbook. So in your textbook, it is on page 107. So it's in the very beginning of chapter 3 in your textbook. So the first step is your brand identity. Who are you? Before people can know about your brand and before they can be loyal to your brand or even want to buy your brand, they have to know, what does your brand do? What product category do you operate in? What is your brand promise? What benefits do you offer? So the objective in this brand identity step is to create salience, which is another word for awareness. And it is to make sure that your brand stands out and that customers will recognize it. So your brand recognition. How do you do this? You need to know your customers and you also need to understand how they make their brand choices so that you can get into that consideration step. Step 2 is brand meaning. Once they know who you are, they need to know what you are. So identify and communicate what your brand means and what it stands for. There are 2 building blocks. Here you'll be looking at your performance. So telling your brand what functionality telling your customers what functionality your brand offers, but also telling them how to feel about your brand, the imagery associated with it. Then your third step is your brand resonance. What should people think or feel? So brand response. What should people think or feel about your brand? So here you're getting customers to actually respond in some way to your product. And we have 2 building blocks that refer to your brand response here. And they are customers' judgments. So after they use the product, what did they think? And their feelings about your brand. Your 4th step is then brand response. Brand resonance. So your 3rd step is brand response. How do people think and feel about your brand? And then your last one is brand resonance. This is the connection that they have with the brand. Resonance should lead to loyalty. If you think about the term resonate, it means that you have a strong feeling towards something and that it just connects with something internally. And that is hopefully what we hope all of our customers feel about our brand, that they have a deep connection or a deep bond with the brand. Here we are seeking active engagement, where customers actively seek more information about our brand. They want to join our Facebook page. They want to Google our brand and find out what's happening. They want to visit our website. They want to be part of our blog, that type of thing. So those are your 4 steps in building a strong brand. And these 4 steps tie in with your customer-based brand equity pyramid. So this slide that's up at the moment is showing you the connection between your 4 steps in building a strong brand and the 4 different levels of your customer-based brand equity pyramid. So they work really well together. Moving from here on to customer value. How do I create customer value? The first step is building customer relationships. So customer relationships are the foundation of brand resonance and building a strong brand. As the power of the brand, as we said, resides in the mind of the customer. Customer relationship management is important. You need to make sure that you keep your customer information and you manage it and use it. So make sure that you have good data management systems with applications where you can track activity, you can manage customer interactions, and that you can make sure that your customers are always satisfied. And then customer equity. So remember, one of your outcomes was you need to know the difference between brand equity and customer equity. So we already said brand equity is the value of the brand. So customer equity in turn would be the value of the customer. So it is the sum of lifetime values of all your customers. So how much money are your customers going to be bringing in to your company? We then get 8 guidelines for maximizing customer equity. And those guidelines are back in your textbook in chapter 2. I'm going to tell you exactly where they are now. Sorry, I lied, not chapter 2. Customer equity is discussed in chapter 3 in your textbook, starting on page 134. And then these guidelines are presented to you on page 135. So the guidelines are exactly the same as what you have here on your slide. The first guideline is invest in your high-value customers. Your customers that are going to bring you the most revenue, those are the ones that you should be aiming the majority of your marketing at. Your second guideline is don't manage products, manage customers. Don't think about your sales as getting a product off the shelf. Think of a sale as getting a satisfied customer and giving that customer a good experience. Number 3, increase sales with add-ons and cross-selling. So the more things you can combine into your sale, the better. The best example we have of cross-selling and add-ons is if you go to a fast food restaurant and you order. If you order a burger, they always ask you, would you like chips and a Coke, chips and a cold drink with that? And they love to ask you if you want to upsize your meal as well. Your next step is to reduce customer acquisition costs. We know that it is much more expensive to acquire a new customer than to keep a happy customer. So the first step there is keep your customers happy, retain the ones that you have. And then when you go out to attract new customers, use the technology that is available to you to keep those costs as low as possible. The 5th guideline for maximizing customer equity is to track customer equity in relation to marketing activities. Know which marketing activities work and which ones don't, so that you don't end up throwing more money into investing in the poor performing activities and rather keep doing what works for you. Guideline number 6, relate branding to customer equity. So make sure that your brand is bringing in highly valuable customers. If your brand isn't, then either you need to think about changing your brand, or perhaps that brand doesn't have the equity that it should, and you should replace it with a different brand. Number 7, monitor the ability of the brand to retain customers. Does your brand bring out loyalty in your customer base? And lastly, you should have 2 different marketing strategies for acquiring new customers and retaining current ones. Satisfied customers don't have to be spoken to in the same way as customers who have no idea about your brand. I'm going to take a minute to pause there to just check, are we all happy with our definition of customer value and customer equity? I don't see anyone typing me any questions, so I'm going to assume that everyone understands and that we can move on to our next topic. Our next topic is brand positioning. And your brand positioning you will find back in chapter 2 of your textbook. I'll tell you the exact page number right now. Your brand positioning is discussed on page 79. That's where we introduce it. So basically, the first step is to look at our definition of a brand positioning. So positioning in marketing is the space, the mental space that your product has in the customer's mind relative to competitors. So when we look at brand positioning, we look at actually taking a step back and deciding what position do we want our product to have in the customer's mind. So designing the brand to occupy a distinct and valuable place in the customer's mind relative to competitors. So if we have a look at the graphic here on the screen, there's a few steps that are involved in developing a good position. We start off with identifying our competitors. That's the first step. Because if I want to be viewed in a certain way relative to my competitors, I need to know who those competitors are. Then I'm going to see where are those competitors positioned. So who's viewed as being the cheapest? Who's viewed as being the most expensive? Who's viewed as being the best quality? That type of thing. Then I will look for gaps in the market and I will look to fill that gap. If there's a space that's open in the customer's mind, it is much easier for me to occupy that space than it is to try and push a competitor off of their already established position. So I will then develop a unique selling proposition or a USP to fill that space, and I will then communicate it to the customer. I will say to the customer, I'm something new, I'm something distinctive, I'm something different, I'm something valuable in the customer's mind. And then I will get that position, and hopefully that brand position will lead to brand equity for you. Whenever we look at positioning, there are 3 key factors that we need to consider. The first one is the competitive frame of reference. Who do your customers consider to be a competitor for your brand? And we need to be careful here because often who we view our competitors are is very narrow. And we need to be careful of the concept of competitive myopia, where my mindset is very narrow of who my competitors are, and where my customers actually have a much broader concept. So that is the first thing I need to do. Look at who are my competitors in my customer's mind. Once I've done that, I need to establish points of difference, which are called POVs, which are the unique features or attributes of my brand that make my brand different from competitors. And then I need to look at points of parity. Parity meaning similarity. So what features do my product have that all the other brands have as well? The example that I've given you for points of parity and points of difference is Red Bull and Monster. So 2 well-known energy drinks that have very valuable brands. If we look at the points of parity first, what is the same between Red Bull and Monster? Firstly, they have a lot of the same competitors. For example, Play and Dragon are competitors for both of them. People also buy them for very similar reasons. A lot of people buy Red Bull and Monster for energy because they are energy drinks. And a lot of people also buy them when they're going out to party because they want to have sustained energy throughout the evening or they want to get a little bit of an energy boost. So those are the points of parity. Now, what are the unique characteristics of each of them? The points of difference of Red Bull is that it's associated with extreme sports. It's said to give you wings. They have a large target market, they have very good brand awareness, and they are a leader in the market. But Monster also has their own points of difference. The first one is that Monster is associated with having a dark side. They have a lower price product offering. They have a segmented market. And you'll notice if you go to a supermarket and have a look at the range, Monster has a lot of variety, whereas Red Bull has really only Red Bull sugar-free and then 2 or 3 different flavors that they offer. And another thing that is associated with Monster is the big can. So Monster always offers that much larger can size than Red Bull does. So I just want to check quickly, are we all 100% certain of what a point of difference is and what a point of parity is? Okay, so I have one confirmation that you guys are cool on those 2 concepts. So I'm going to take that as everyone is happy. If you do have any questions, please just type up a message and I will go back to it. Just to recap, your points of parity and points of difference in your textbook are discussed starting at the very bottom of page 82 and continuing on to page 83 and 84. And you will actually see at the bottom of page 84 a little summary of the types of things that are looked at for points of difference. Still continuing with brand positioning strategy concerns finding the right place for the brand in the customer's mind. So that's why we tend to look for gaps. You don't want to be piled on top of someone else, because then you're going to really only have points of parity and nothing unique. So how are you going to go about finding that uniqueness and that area in the customer's mind for you to position yourself? There are 5 key factors that define brand position. The first one are your brand attributes, features and benefits that your brand has to offer. Then you have consumer expectation, what customers expect to receive from the brand. You also need to be aware of competitor attributes because they are going to have benefits and features as well. You don't want to be similar to them and only have points of parity by having all the same benefits. You need to look at things that you can offer that will be unique and different. Pricing is also important. We know that pricing can lead customers to view you as a luxury or a necessity or like a little guilty pleasure or a spoiled product or something that's used on a daily basis. And you also need to look at your customer perception. How do customers view your brand in terms of quality and value? Because that will also determine your position in their market. So having looked at positioning and customer-based brand equity, we can now go on to a very important concept that is often used in your brand management assessment, and that is the brand value chain. So up on the screen at the moment, you have a figure which is the brand value chain, but in your textbooks, I will find it for you now. It is in chapter 3, and you will find it on page 128. So it's the beginning bit of the discussion and the figure are on page 128, and the ongoing pages then explain each of these steps in a bit more detail. So I'm going to go over each of these steps with you. Basically, the way that the brand value chain works is each of your value stages build on each other. And the ultimate goal of marketing is that you put out a marketing program, customers decide that they like your product, They then go out and buy your product, and the company ends up making a lot of money, and the shareholders or the owners of the business ultimately benefit. So every business, the ultimate goal is to increase shareholder wealth. Now, what happens is with the brand value chain, you don't just have those value stages. You also have what we call multipliers. And an analogy that I like to use to explain the brand value chain is that if the chain were going to gym, every time you go to gym, you get an extra benefit. So let's say we go to gym every week. At the end of the week, you're going to feel fitter, healthier, stronger. Now let's pretend that the multipliers are supplements. So we could go as far as to say they could be steroids. So every time you go to gym, you get a little bit fitter and stronger. But what if every time you went to gym, you added a supplement? It would just boost the impact of the gym. So I go to gym and I use a supplement. Now I'm fitter and stronger than I was before. I go to gym again and I use another supplement. Fitter and stronger than I was before. So that is the role of these multipliers. They are there to enhance each of the steps in the brand value chain. So let's start by looking at the first one. The first stage in your chain is the marketing program investment. So this is the communication that you put out into the market. So you as a marketer design a good product, you design a good communication program, you go out into the trade and you get a good relationship with wholesalers and retailers, you have good employees, and you do everything necessary to design a good marketing program. Your aim is that this program will have a benefit or beneficial effect on the customer's mindset. The marketing program will make customers want to buy the brand. But if you use the program multiplier and you develop a program that is very distinct, that is relevant, that is integrated, that adds value, and that is an excellent program, it will enhance the impact on the customer's mindset. And you will end up with customers who have high levels of awareness, who have strong, favorable, and unique associations to the brand, who have good attitudes towards the brand, who have attachment or brand loyalty, and who show activity. What does activity mean? Activity means they go out into the marketplace and they purchase the product offering. That leads to brand performance. So if my marketing is good and my program multiplier enhances it, and my customers know about my brand and are brand loyal, it means that I can sell my brand at a premium. I don't suffer from price elasticities. In other words, customers are not sensitive to price changes. I have large market share. I can expand my range so I can offer different brand variations. I have a positive cost structure that works in my favor, and I am profitable. Now, this brand performance will be enhanced by the customer multiplier. So if my reactions are very competitive and I get to steal market share from my competitors, if I have channel support, so the trade will stock more of my product and is happy to market my product for me, and if I have a good customer base and a strong customer profile, that will then enhance my brand performance. Good brand performance coupled with good market dynamics, strong growth potential, a low risk profile, and a strong brand contribution to my profitability means that I will have increased shareholder wealth or increased shareholder value. That means I'm going to have a good stock price, or the share price for my product will be high. My shareholders will earn a good P to E ratio, which if you remember from finance, is your price to earnings ratio, and I will have market capitalization. Market capitalization means my share price increases over time. So if a shareholder were to sell a share, they would earn more money than what they originally paid for the share. So this concept is very important, and you guys need to have a good, thorough understanding of it. So I've done a quick example using Coca-Cola. So let's look at Coca-Cola's marketing program investment. Coca-Cola makes a good quality product. It is well marketed, and they have very strong relationships with their retailers by giving them the Coke fridges and all of those things. This is enhanced by their program quality. The Coca-Cola brand is always marketed with clarity, with relevance, with distinctiveness, and their marketing campaigns are always consistent over time. So this means that the customer mindset is good. Due to good marketing programs and good program quality, Coca-Cola has high levels of brand awareness, positive associations and attributes, strong brand attachment, and excellent levels of market activity. If we couple this with the marketplace conditions, where in South Africa, Coca-Cola doesn't really face competitive reaction. They are the market leader. They have high levels of market support, and they have a very large target market. This means that in terms of market performance, Coca-Cola is performing well. They have a positive customer mindset, favorable market conditions, and this means they can sell their product at a premium. They maintain large market share. They can expand their range successfully, as we've seen through all the different types of Coca-Cola products, and we know Coca-Cola is profitable. All of these things combined leads to strong investor sentiment. Investors are very eager to invest in Coca-Cola as they see future growth potential, they see low risk in the investment, and they see that the brand is a valuable asset for the company. And if we combine all of these things together, we end up with shareholder value. So the good market performance combined with favorable investor sentiment means that Coca-Cola stock sells at relatively high prices. They have a good price to earnings ratio, and they reward their shareholders with market capitalization or earning a profit on the sale of their shares. So before I continue, I just want to check that everyone is happy with the brand value chain model and that you understand all the components and how they work with each other. So far I have all the comments are that you guys are happy with the explanation, but I did have a question asking again what pages in the textbook to follow. So the model and the introduction to the model is on page 128, 128, and the definition of each of the stages continues further into the textbook. Okay, so continuing from our brand value chain, we now have a concept known as the brand mantra. And often what happens in assessments is that you guys are actually asked to design a brand mantra for a brand. So I want you guys to be very familiar with this and be comfortable with it. And like get a lot of practice in. Look at different brands and identify these different elements in their brand mantras. So brand mantra is usually 3 to 5 words. So it doesn't have to be a sentence or a phrase that necessarily makes sense. Like grammatically correct, as to say. It just needs to be 3 or 5 words that fulfill 3 functions. And if you are looking in your textbook, your brand mantra is discussed in, so from page 95 in your textbook, pages 95 to 96, it is discussed. So basically, with your brand mantra, what happens is the 3 to 5 words have to perform 3 functions. You've got the brand function, the descriptive modifier, and the emotional modifier. So the brand function means you should be discussing or describing the nature of the product or service in some way. The descriptive modifier then describes it further or clarifies the nature. And then the emotional modifier adds another level. It tells you something about the benefits of the brand. So to help explain this, you have 3 examples. I have 3 examples for you to look at in your learner guide. So if you have a look on page 35 of your learner guides, if you have it open, or if you just want to write down that page number, it's on page 35 of your learner guide, they give us an example of Disney. So the brand mantra for Disney is fun, family, and entertainment. So fun, family, entertainment. So if we look at our different functions, the brand function is that it is offering you entertainment. That's the brand function. What type of entertainment are you getting? Your descriptive modifier, family entertainment. And then how will you feel about that entertainment? Fun. So the brand function is entertainment, the descriptive is family, the emotional is fun. They give us another one, which is for American Express. And they say for American Express, the credit card, world-class service, personal recognition. So the brand definition is that it is service. What type? World-class. And the emotional, what benefits does it offer you? Personal recognition. At the bottom of page 35 in your learning guide, they give you another one, and that is for Nike. And they say the mantra for Nike is authentic, athletic performance. So the brand is giving you performance. What type of performance? Athletic. And what is the benefit to it? It is authentic. It is high quality and unique. Does that make sense to everyone? I want you guys to just practice designing your own mantras or deciphering what the different elements are from mantras. Because if you have a look at the past papers on your portal, I'm sure that you will notice that the mantra does come up as a question quite often. Then we have choosing brand elements. So your brand element, so that actually takes us into chapter 4. So ending of chapters 2 and 3, the main things that you needed to gather from that were, what is customer-based brand equity? The customer-based brand equity pyramid, the 4 steps in building a good brand equity. Then we looked at your brand positioning, we looked at your brand value chain, and then we looked at your brand mantra. So those are the key things from these chapters. So now we can move on to chapter 4. So chapter 4 is the last chapter that we're going to be looking at this evening, because this is the final chapter that relates to your assignment. So the first step for us is to design brand elements. So in your textbook, they give you a list of different brand elements or options that you have when you design your brand. And you will find these in chapter 4, and they are discussed in detail from page 147 to page 147. Basically, the brand elements options that you have is your brand name, your URL, your logo, your brand characters, the slogan of your brand, the jingle, and the packaging. So we did try earlier to upload a McDonald's video for you to watch so that we could identify all the different brand elements. But I feel like McDonald's is a brand that most people are quite familiar with, so it should be quite easy for us to identify the different elements. So let's think about it. McDonald's, what is the brand name? It is McDonald's. And they use that brand name effectively in a lot of their products. They have the chicken McNuggets, they have the McCafe, so they use the McDonald's a lot in naming their different products. If we think about the URL, we might not be 100% certain what the URL is, but it's probably something very similar to www.mcdonalds.com. So they would likely have a very easy URL to remember. If we think about the logo, the McDonald's logo, they refer to it as the golden arches. So it's just that yellow M is synonymous with McDonald's. Then you have brand characters. And this is one of the reasons why I chose McDonald's as an example, because we have Ronald McDonald. He is the brand persona. If McDonald's was a person, this is exactly what they would look like. And Ronald McDonald is the colors of McDonald's, red and yellow. He brings across a fun-loving, youthful personality, and he wears the McDonald's logo on his dungarees. Then we have the McDonald's slogan. So I'm sure everyone can immediately jump into everyone's minds, but the McDonald's slogan is, "I'm loving it." And they have their jingle that goes along with it, which I won't bother you with my singing. But we can all hear, if you say "I'm loving it," I'm sure you can all hear the jingle playing in your heads. And then we have packaging. McDonald's packaging is very specific. Even on their cold drink, their cups, that polystyrene type cup, they have the golden arches, it says McDonald's, and where it tells you to please recycle, there's a little icon of Ronald McDonald running and throwing his rubbish into a little dustbin. And it will say, "I'm loving it" as well. So they really incorporate all of their brand elements into their packaging. I feel like on everyone's next trip to McDonald's, try and identify all those different elements, or just Google any YouTube video of a McDonald's ad, and you will see all of those brand elements will pop up in that ad. Now, when we choose brand elements, when McDonald's sat down and they picked Ronald McDonald and the Golden Arches 60-something years ago, they looked at certain criteria to determine what makes a good brand element and what makes a bad brand element. And these criteria are given to you in your textbook a little bit before the brand elements themselves. They are given to you starting on page 142, and they are discussed in detail in the following pages. So basically, your criteria is split into two categories. You have offensive criteria and defensive. Your offensive criteria are used to build brand equity, and then your defensive criteria are used to maintain that equity once it's established. So the first three are offensive. We use these to build brand equity. They are, is it memorable? Is it meaningful? Is it likable? So let's use Ronald McDonald, the brand character, as an example. His name is very memorable. The fact that it rhymes makes it memorable. Ronald McDonald. And his appearance is also memorable. He's a clown, he's got red hair, he's got the stripy suit. So he stands out. Then you have meaningfulness. Is Ronald meaningful? The fact that his name is Ronald McDonald shows a strong connection to McDonald's, so that adds to the meaningfulness. So that would be general information about the nature of the product category. Ronald McDonald is associated with McDonald's. Then more specifically, the meaning that he portrays is energetic, a positive attitude, happy, fun, and quite youthful, which is very similar to the image that McDonald's tries to portray. I do also think that it's quite key that Ronald is always quite athletic. If you see the pictures of him, he's normally playing soccer or running to throw rubbish away or something like that. And I think that that is his personality of being athletic and energetic is used to try and offset any negative, bad health connotation that McDonald's might have. Then you have likability. Think of Ronald McDonald. Is he likable? Yes, he is. He's a clown, which is supposed to be fun-loving, although some people do have a bit of a clown phobia. But he's a clown, and he's always happy, and he's got his gang of friends around him, and he's nice and brightly colored with a big smile on his face. So in terms of those three criteria, Ronald McDonald is a good brand element. Then looking at the defensive, in the future, will Ronald McDonald be valuable in maintaining brand equity? So the first thing we look at is transferability. Transferability refers to two things. Can we extend Ronald McDonald into other category extensions? So could Ronald McDonald be drinking Mac Cafe? Could Ronald McDonald be eating a Burry burger? Yes, he can. He's quite easily manipulated to fit into different situations. Then, could Ronald McDonald work across geographic boundaries? And I think Ronald McDonald's image is something that is easily carried into different cultures. He isn't offensive to anyone. He's quite generic, looking for a clown, and he can probably be transferred into a lot of different target markets. Then we look at adaptability. Is the brand element adaptable? So can it be made relevant in a variety of contexts? And if we think about the golden arches, McDonald's can stick them on absolutely everything. And if we think about Ronald McDonald, during McDonald's sponsorship of the Olympics, Ronald can play any sport, and Ronald can fit into any situation. So he is quite adaptable. And even over time, Ronald has adapted. His look has changed a little bit so that he keeps up with current trends and is appealing to the target market. And lastly, protectability. Ronald McDonald is protectable. He is trademarked. He belongs to McDonald's. Nobody else is allowed to use Ronald McDonald. So in terms of criteria for brand elements, you would use these 6 criteria to evaluate whether a brand element is valuable and will add brand equity, or whether it isn't valuable and will rather remove or detract brand equity over time. So this concept is extremely important, and I hope that you guys have a good understanding of it. If in your learner guide, this is the table that you are presented with. It is, I'll tell you right now which page. It can be found on page 52 of your learner guide. And as I said in the textbook, it is also expanded on quite a bit, and that starts on page 142. I do see that I have a comment that the connection isn't so great at the moment, but I hope that it's just a temporary bad connection and that we'll get back to our good connection place from earlier. Finally, to end off with chapter 4, we have putting all the brand elements together. McDonald's doesn't just have Ronald. Ronald is there, and he has the McDonald's name, and he has the logo, and he eats their burgers, and he drinks their Mac Cafe. So we have to put all of the elements together in order to build our brand equity. The hope is that each element will add to the equity, and that in combination, they are more valuable than they would be individually. So the McDonald's name, their slogan, their logo, their little jingle, and everything actually builds their equity over time, or the value that the brand has in the customer's mind. So now that we've gone through the 4 chapters that you guys will be covering in your assignment, I'm going to go over the different questions for your assignment and where is the best place for you to look to find your answers. So the first step that I hope you guys approach with all of your assignments is to make sure that you know how to reference your assignments correctly. Your referencing and your in-text citations can lose you up to 10 marks if not done correctly. And this is a crucial part of your educational process. A lot of students want to know, why do they lose the marks for referencing? Why is it even important? And it's just important for your quality of academic work. So you should look at it as important as presenting your work uniquely. In order for you to be growing in your educational development, you need to be able to reference a variety of sources, and you need to be able to show where that information comes from. So I hope that you see referencing more as a necessary skill to acquire than as something that's just like a pain that you need to do. So as learning this necessary skill, it is important for you guys to watch the referencing webinar that IMM is going to be presenting to you so that you know exactly how to approach your referencing. And please remember that you also have your Harvard referencing guide. It is under your My Study Support link on your e-learn. And I've provided the link for you as well. So you guys can copy it down if you need to, if you're struggling to find it under My Study Support. And the nice thing about that guide is that it's a PDF, which means you can use your find function. And if you need to reference a video, it means you can search in there and it will quickly tell you where to look on how to reference a video, how to reference a lecture, how to reference a journal, any of those things. But for now, your assignment has given you your reference for your prescribed textbook, which is Keller Strategic Brand Management, Building and Measuring and Managing Brand Equity. And it also refers to your learner guide. As you've seen, a lot of the information can be found there as well. Please use other sources too, though. It's important that you guys have a number of sources to show that you've put a lot of effort into your research. And also, it's important that you have at least one website in your reference list in order for you to get all the marks for your referencing. I have a question by someone who's asking to get a copy of the table of contents. I'm not sure which table of contents you are referring to, so if you can just be more specific, then I'll make sure you can get one of those. Okay, so specific instructions for completing your assignments. Marks will be awarded for logical argument and sound reasoning. You need to give evidence of independent research. So please look online and at other resources to get information. And relevant application of knowledge is important. You can really only be marked correctly in an assignment if you show an understanding of the work. We know that you have your textbook and your learning guide with you while you complete your assignment, so there's no real point in regurgitating the theory information. It's much better for you to give us the theory that is important to get your theory marks, but go in depth and explain it and apply it with good application. The questions are all based on your attached article, which is on feature phones. I must say that I found this article very interesting because I feel like a lot of people think smartphones are the way to go and they are the product that customers want. And after reading the article, it's very interesting to see that we do have different customer segments for cell phones and that not everyone actually wants to use a smartphone and the different products that are available for those customers. Okay, so I've got some clarification on the table of contents. Basically, the table of contents that you need to be giving with your assignment is just a regular table of contents like what you would find in the beginning of a textbook, where it says question 1 found on page 2, question 3 found on page 4, question 4 found on page 5, and so on. Your Word document will do it automatically if you insert a table of contents, or you can insert it manually yourself. I hope that answers your question. Okay, so for your assignment, question 1. It is clear from the article on feature phones that recent developments in consumer preferences can significantly complicate marketing practices, and pose challenges for brand managers. So identify and discuss 5 main branding challenges facing marketers of feature phones. So I would suggest easy to use layout, easy for you, easy for the marker. A table where you list your 5 challenges, you then explain each of them, and then you relate each of them to the features phone article. So just to refresh your memories, those 5 challenges, your learner guide presented you with 7 of the challenges in chapter 1, and your textbook gave you an expanded list of challenges in chapter 1 as well. I have another question. In the assignment, you are asked to formulate brand elements based on a well-known brand. Is it acceptable to create your slogan, look and feel that are totally different from the existing brand identity? I would suggest sticking to a brand and sticking to the elements that they are currently using, because the question is asking you to evaluate each of them in terms of the 6 criteria. So it's much easier to stick with something that already exists, because then you have an example to work from, rather than creating something yourself, which might be a little bit more work. Okay, so just to check, is everyone happy with question 1 and where to find that content? Okay, great. So remember, this is for 25 marks. 5 marks will be for naming the challenge. Potentially, 5 to 10 marks will be for the explanation. And the rest of your marks are coming from applying your case study. So I want you guys to work very hard at giving good examples from the case study and aiming at getting maybe 2 to 3 marks just out of the case study application alone. Moving on to question 2. Discuss in detail how feature phones are different from smartphones or mobile phones, considering the nature of competitors and the points of difference. So points of difference we have already discussed. You can find them in your textbook in chapter 2, I think it was. I will find you the page number right now. In your textbook, on page 83, we discuss points of difference. And those are the unique features or attributes of feature phones versus other phones. And your case study does specify 4 specific differences. And then there's other differences that you would just have to read a little bit more detail in the case study and almost like pull those differences out from the case study. However, the question on, still sticking to question 2, when looking at the nature of competitors, that is in your textbook from page 81. And there's a variety of things you need to look at. So you need to look at the competitors for the feature phones. What type of competition do they offer to feature phones? And the types of things that you would look at here in your textbook, starting on page 81, would be who do they target? What channels of distribution do they use versus the feature phones? What are the resources and capabilities of the competitors? What are the competitors' intentions? So competitively, do they want to steal market share? Do they want to divest and start producing feature phones as well? That type of thing. And then you also need to look at indirect competition. When you read through the case study, you'll see that a feature phone sells for about 245 Rand, and they generally sell to your lower LSMs. So we need to be broad in our thinking of competitors and think about when you are in a low income earner, a very low income earner, in LSMs 1, 2, and 3, and you have 245 Rand that you've saved up, where else could you be spending that money? And you may actually be spending it on necessities. And those indirect competitors need to be considered as well. Okay, so to check, are you guys happy with what question 2 is asking you? Not just the points of difference, but also the nature of competition. Okay, awesome. I'm glad. I'm hoping that there are going to be some high marks for these assignments. If we move on to question 3, you are now looking at your brand value chain. So this is why I said to you guys it was so important that I wanted you to understand these concepts really well. So with the brand value chain, you need to identify and discuss. So it's going to be very in-depth. The 4 stages of the value chain, and then the 3 multipliers, which was those 3 things that enhance the performance of the stages. But we are looking at the brand value chain for a typical retailer selling a feature phone. So the first thing you guys need to do is do research into who sells feature phones. If you walk into a Cell C, MTN, or Vodacom store, you will see that the majority of phones that they're offering are smartphones, because those are the ones that earn them the most money. However, if you go into PEP, Ackermans, or Jets, you will see feature phones for sale. So you now need to place yourself in the position of one of those retailers and design the brand value chain in relation to them. You are going to be getting 4 marks for each of the 4 stages. So you need to discuss on each of those bullet points that is presented underneath the stage. And then you'll be getting 3 marks for each of the 3 multipliers, which again means discussing each of the aspects and explaining how the multiplier enhances the next step. So remember, this is what your brand value chain looked like. In your textbook, it is given to you on page 128, and it is explained in detail. So yes, page 128. Then your final question. This has to do with your brand elements. They are hoping to relaunch the Nokia 3110. So if you guys remember that, that was a little Nokia. It had the little green screen. You could play Snake on it. And at the time of its launch, it was quite a cool phone because it was quite small and it was a quite cool design for the old school cell phones. And they're looking at bringing it back as a feature phone. So what you need to do is you need to identify 5 of the 6 brand elements of the Nokia. So you're going to look at things like the brand name, the logo, the jingle. And remember, Nokia does have that little jingle that played in the ads, and it played whenever you turn the Nokia on. If you go onto YouTube, you'll definitely find videos that show you that those different aspects of the Nokia. Now you need to list those 5 of those elements. Okay, so brand name, logo, slogan, things like that. And then you are going to evaluate each of those 6 in terms of the criteria for choosing brand elements. So if you take the brand name, Nokia 3110, you are then going to say, how memorable is that brand name? How meaningful is that brand name? Is it likable? Is it transferable? Is it adaptable? And is it protectable? So you're basically going to rate each of those brand elements. And I would say that the aim of this question is that at the end, you would be able to say, the brand name is good, but the slogan, they should change, or that type of interpretation from. So again, you have the table in your learner guide and in your textbook of the 6 criteria for evaluating your brand. Does everyone feel confident about what that question is asking from them? Yes, the criteria are on page 142, and then they are discussed over the next few pages. But then the actual brand elements only start being discussed from page 147. So the brand elements are from page 147 onwards, but the criteria are from page 142. Okay, great. So it seems like everyone is happy with the assignment questions. Everything that you need is in your textbook, and in your learner guide. The only bit of information that isn't in your learner guide is that one section on the nature of competition. That is in your textbook only. So I've got another question coming up. To obtain full marks on each brand element, you need to provide at least 4 points to achieve 5 marks for each element. Yes, you would need to. So you would need to do a very thorough evaluation of each of those brand elements, which is why you have 6 different criteria. So I think there's a lot of information that you would be able to get. And finally, please remember that your structure is important to your assignment as well. It's so sad to see a student lose a mark because they forgot to justify or because they forgot to have the right font. Please remember that even your headings need to be Arial font size 12. So in your heading that says question 1, you can make it bold, you can underline it, but still make sure that it is Arial font size 12. There are some students who are still slightly confused about what it means to justify your font. When you open a Word document, generally what happens is you select that your font will be justified to the left of the page. So there's a button that you push where it says the font will all line up to the left. Next to it is the option to make all your font come into the center of your page. And then you have the one that says all the font will be lined up from the right. Now, there's a fourth button where all the lines are exactly the same length. That's what it means to justify your text. So your assignment needs to be on that fourth setting. Also, please remember to start every question on a new page. Also, diagrams are very helpful, especially for your brand value chain. It might help for you to insert a copy of the diagram. If, however, you do Google different pictures of the diagram, or even if you hand draw it or use your computer to draw it and insert it yourself, please remember to reference that diagram so that you don't use any referencing marks. And other than that, I feel like everyone is pretty prepared to work on their assignment and hand in a good quality, high mark earning assignment. And one of the students has also just given a shortcut for how to justify your font. If you use Control J, your font will then be justified. So thank you very much for that info. If there are no further questions, then I think we can end the session. So just about the diagram, if you choose to insert a diagram of your brand value chain, please make sure that you reference it correctly. So you reference that either you obtained it from Keller, your textbook, or if you copied it from an online source, you need to reference that it was obtained from that online source. And to the students who are leaving us, good night. And I hope that you feel confident and that you're excited to continue on with your brand management assignment. To those who are still logged on, I just want to remind you, your code for this subject is BM001. Please be careful that you don't mark it as BM101, because then it will go in with all of the brand management um, projects, assignments, and then that just creates a little bit of an admin problem. So please remember to mark it down as BM001 or BM201. It should not be BM101 or BM202 because those are the business management codes. Other than that, I don't think I've got any more to say, so good luck and good night.